What's up, everyone? Thanks for joining us today. I am joined by Jose Sanchez III of Sports Illustrated. Jose, how you doing?
Doing all right today, Zach. Appreciate you having me on, brother. How's it going?
Doing good, man. We're going to talk some 49ers today, guys, as usual. And we're going to start right off. We're going to get right into things. The 49ers, last season, they had an interesting offensive line situation. There were a lot of injuries, guys filling in, and they didn't really seem to change much this offseason except for, they swapped Person for Brunskill, and then obviously Joe Staley retiring. We can talk about that a little later. But do you think that they've done enough to kind of make the next step with their offensive line?
Absolutely. Considering what the parameters of the salary cap was allowing and everything that they could have done, it's really was a pick your poison. And I thought John Lynch eloquated it beautifully when he was talking about, it's like free agency when you're going in there, the grocery aisle. You can't have everything now. Now you got to take one and put something back. And that's exactly what he elaborated to. It's same thing with DeForest Buckner. We can't have Buckner and Armstead. You got to pick one or another. And that's just the reality of the NFL. And as much as the interior offensive line was, to me, in my eyes, their Achilles heel, and it got blown up in 3 games against the Falcons, Rams, and Super Bowl, obviously, they did the best they can. And personally, I think Daniel Brunskill is an upgrade to Mike Person. Now, is he a dramatic upgrade? That's yet to be seen because Brunskill was much better as a tackle, in my eyes. So if he can actually get there, gets his body to be hold up right as in terms of his strength, because that's the one thing that he needed, because he has the lateral quickness and he's in there. And, they also got, as you alluded to a little bit, Joe Staley, Trent Williams, and it's massive upgrade. I mean, come on, I know we all love Joe Staley, especially for fans, but Trent Williams is better. And he's on a year off, so he's going to make that better. I mean, they were rolling out just in school, for crying out loud. So, I mean, you got Trent Williams out there. I'm pretty sure the offensive line is going to be much smoother. So it's really as interior as Weston Richburg going to be healthy. And, it's all about Brunskill. And I agree. Did they do enough? They did what they had to do, but at this point, it's about coaching Brunskill up and for him to make the use of this opportunity, because if he does actually prove to be solid in 2020, assuming there is a season, assuming there is one, then he's going to be in for somewhat of a payday, because he's going to prove that, hey, I can play tackle. I mean, you can even throw me at center. It's pretty insane how this guy, I'm still shocked when watching that Packers game on that Sunday night that he was able to go left tackle, boom, like that. And I was like, I'm asking people in press, I was like, is that Daniel Brunskill, or am I just drawing any glasses now? It's just amazing. So I think he's an upgrade, and I think they did a great job at that position.
Yeah, it was something to watch. He was able to just plug and play, and it didn't really seem to matter to him. He was ready to go no matter where they put him. It was a hell of a pickup for the 49ers. I don't know where they find these guys. You also alluded to Trent Williams, the big offseason move, aside at least acquiring somebody, because they moved Buckner, obviously. How is that transition going to go? You said yourself, Joe Staley's a fan favorite, but you kind of had to admit it seemed like he was slipping a little bit. He said himself when he retired, his body wasn't recovering at the same rate. He was starting to lose feeling in his extremities. Trent Williams is healthy. Like you said, he had a year off football. How do you see that transition going this year?
I mean, it's hard not to say. It's really hard to take the fan goggles, I know, for some people, but because once again, Joe Staley, the fact that he was still playing at pretty much a high level at his age with the injuries, not hardly even slowing him down except for keeping him on the sideline, was incredible. But Trent Williams is younger. He's about 5-6 years younger. His resume is even better than Staley's, just in terms of if you're going to look at Pro Bowls and All Pros and all that stuff, and just accomplishments. And he just fits. He fits the system well. He moves and he's quickness, because that's the key thing. And that's why I also think, like I said, Brunskill is going to be fine at right guard. Is you got to have that lateral quickness. We know the 49ers love that zone run scheme, whether it's going outside or stretching or even occasionally in the inside. But Trent Williams, man, they didn't have too many issues with pass pro on that left side, but there should definitely be no questions now there. And I just think the running game just takes to new heights. It's just going to be a sight. I don't want to say sight for sore eyes, because that's almost a disrespect to Joe Staley, but it is going to be felt. Now, I think now there's going to be a lot of pressure on him, because people like me are touting him as like, hey, he's better and he's really good. And look, you're replacing Joe Staley. I know he says, Trent Williams says, hey, you don't replace a player like that. But the reality is you're replacing him. All right. You leave someone, you go fill in the hole, you're replacing them. it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot high totem pole for him. And imagine if he starts out kind of shaky early on, then it's going to be like, well, what the hell did we give up all these picks for him or whatever, so and so and that. It's going to be a little bit over dramatic, but no, they'll be fine. They'll be fine in that aspect. You know, they didn't have, like I said, the whole even offensive line didn't take a major upgrade, but there was upgrades to admonish. And it really is just to see how it's all going to play out in the big grander scheme of things.
You know, I think two main things that you touched on. Well, I know you touched on at least him being out of football for a year. That's huge, especially when offensive lineman constantly in the trenches, constantly, you know, taking a beating. And then another big thing that I know a lot of people have talked to about already, but he's familiar with the system. I know that when they asked him, he said, I wanted to come here. I know Kyle Shanahan. I know I can play well in his system. So I think that's huge for the 49ers and for Trent Williams. It's not like he's going to a team. He's got to learn a new system. He's not familiar with the coach, not familiar with the, you know, the running game, any of that. He's familiar and he's excelled in it before. So I think that he's, you know, he set himself up for success, and I think he came to the right team. Obviously, I'm a little biased here, but I do think that he came to the right team. He's coming up on that contract extension. There's already been talks coming in. How do you see that going, and how much do you think he should get?
You know, it's a little tricky because obviously, you know, there's a global pandemic going on, and I've actually barely just got around to this like last week of just talking to other like, you know, people in the media, like Chris Biederman, just reading what he's doing. And it's a lot of sounding of they don't know how to structure it a little bit. We know Paraj Marte, grand wizard of structure contracts, but the reality is next year, if the NFL season goes and there are fans, that projected increase in salary cap hit, it's going to go down. It's going to go down massive. I don't know how much because I'm not a cap wizard. That's a whole different department, but that definitely, you have to be naive not to say that doesn't play a huge factor, because now you can't allocate money to the future years. And that is exactly what the 49ers did with Eric Armstead. You know, they allocated his money to different years and were even backloaded just to make it better so they win now and long-term sustainability. And as much as they want to pay George Kittle, that's going to be tricky. So that one, it's really hard to touch on because it can last for the whole summer, for all I know, for all anyone knows, because of the situation now. So it's very raw and tender right now. As in terms of how much he could pay, assuming everything does go right, that is, now you got to start comparing them to the tight ends. Who's the top 10 getting paid right now? It's Austin Hooper, right? $13 million guaranteed. All right. He has to topple that easily. And now people are going to say, well, now he's not really a tight end, which is true. He's not really a tight end. He's an everything. He's an offensive nuclear weapon. And now you have to start considering the fact of, okay, wide receiver. And how I kind of compare George Kittle's situation is to Christian McCaffrey. You know, he's not a running back. He's not a wide receiver. He's both and then some. What's George Kittle? He's not a tight end. He's not a wide receiver. He's that. And he's an offensive lineman. All right. So he's going to be seeing some hefty money. And I think I wouldn't even argue that he's not worth like the 18, 19 per, you know, because even Sammy Watkins, I don't know his current contract now, but I remember when he got signed, he was getting like $16.5 million a year. You're going to tell me George Kittle isn't worth just a few more than that? Come on. So it's going to be a very tight push here for him. He's definitely worth around that. And he's the offensive weapon that goes. All right. He's their best player. You know, as much as, you know, quarterback is big. If Jimmy Garoppolo was gone, they would have took some teetering off. But point is, George Kittle was out for those few games for the Niners. They kind of dropped off some. That's the reality. You know, if he's in that game for the Seahawks on Monday night, as much as all those injuries happened that game, if he's in that game, they're winning, and Week 17 isn't happening. So around 19, I would say. And then you really got to start pushing about guarantee. But considering, you know, all the coronavirus hoopla, it's really going to be a tough situation to figure out his contract.
Yeah. And, you know, that's a great point. The fact that it's not really, we've never seen a situation like this affect the salary cap, affect the NFL, anything like that. So it's kind of, we're going into uncharted territories, and it's almost like we'll figure it out as we go. But I think, I mean, he is definitely going to reset the tight end market. That's for sure. I mean, no team has seen a tight end like him in a long time. It almost reminds me of like when Tony Gonzalez came into the league and people were like, oh my God, this tight end who's a basketball player who can, you know, do all these things. He's a monster receiver. That reminds me of kind of George Kittle right now. And you can compare him to Travis Kelce, but Travis Kelce's not nearly the blocker that George Kittle is. George Kittle might not be as good of a receiver per se, but he's still a more, I think, I mean, obviously, again, I'm biased, but he's an all-around better player than Travis Kelce. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the 49ers shape that contract and how much they want to, I don't want to say reward him because that's not really quite fair, but how much they are willing to value him and pay him throughout the next year or so, or a couple of years, I should say. Now, let me ask you this. Do you see any scenario where he plays for a different team because of this specific contract not really working out, them not coming to an agreement?
Well, crazier things have happened, but I'm not hedging bets here. I'm going to go all in and say no, because the 49ers would be crazy to let him go. And if they do let him go, it'd probably be in a trade. No, it wouldn't be in a trade because the Niners have too much respect for these type of players. But then again, they also traded DeForest Buckner, so anything could happen in that terms. But no, I'm going to say there's no way that they let him go. They know how valuable he is. And Kyle Shanahan is an offensive-minded guy. He obviously has those biases towards that side of the ball, even though he recently said, I'm always going to go defense first in terms of defensive line because it helps me. He wants to have George Kittle because it does so much for that offense in terms of variety. You never know if he's going to block, if he's going to boot out, if he's going to go out for a route deep. What is he going to do? Is he going to you just never know, man. It's like a pitcher at this point. It's like baseball. This is where the baseball aspect comes into football. He's throwing that sinker, or he's coming straight at you with that fastball. You just never know. So I just can't envision a scenario where they let Kittle go. That's the number one player I don't envision that they let anyone in the 49ers go at all.
Yeah, we did a video recently kind of ranking the 49ers top players, and I think that it's like Kittle, and then there's a huge gap, and then there's everybody else. Like, regardless of how talented other players are, regardless of how talented Armstead, Bosa, Kittle is just in his own class, and the 49ers, like you said, would be absolutely crazy to let him go. I don't envision that happening either, but like you said, crazier things have happened. More teams need to kind of be more aggressive. They're emphasizing stopping the run previously, but maybe the pass defenses are the ones that are shining and the ones that are kind of being more effective. Do you think the 49ers defense should kind of take a page out of that playbook and start being more aggressive on their pass defense and not focusing so much on stopping the run?
No, not at all. I don't even think their primary focus is to stop the run because they wouldn't have switched to a wide nine scheme. Their idea is, hey, the more pass rushers, the less time these coverage guys have to stay in place, and it's easier to find more pass rush, more adequate defensive linemen than it is to build a whole array of corners, let alone a secondary. And that's why, personally, I hate when players or fans want to shell out money for that lockdown corner. It's like, you're going to allocate all that money for that one player. What about the rest of the corners? They can just easily swing their way around. Versus, you can't really do that with a defensive lineman. For example, Nick Bosa, you're going to have to throw resources at him. You're right. You're going to have to throw the back at him, which means he's not going to go out for a run. You're going to throw a left tackle at him, maybe even a left guard if you have to chip, for all I care. But it's just, and this is coming from a guy who played DB in college. I love cornerbacks, but don't ever pay top dollar. I'd rather go for go overspend on the pass rush because this is a passing league, and then just try to develop your talent. And personally, I think the Niners secondary gets chewed out a little too more than people think. Richard Sherman, everyone knows about him. He's getting up there in age, but that's the future you got to worry about. Emmanuel Mosley is a great young product. I love that guy. I think he's going to be really, really solid for years to come. Just depends as long as he doesn't let that 3rd and 15 bite him or haunt him. And then K'Wan Williams, man, that's the second best corner. That's the second best secondary player on the team. Forget Jimmy Ward. K'Wan Williams is the best because he plays slot, and that's difficult. That's really difficult to play slot corner, and you have to address for the running game. So for a small guy like him, that's why they call him the Shark. Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw and all of them had nothing but kind words to say whenever I asked about him. So it's just, that secondary is fine, I think, in this case. But the way the 49ers developing it, their mold was fine. Why deviate from what got you to the Super Bowl and what's working? And it's just, and I feel like the way my theory is making sense is the same way maybe they're thinking it, because as much as their run game, and even the 49ers run game defense isn't ideal, they gave up 4.4 yards per carry last year. And I think, honestly, that's going to probably stay around there because Kinlaw, as much as he is a beast in pass rush, he's not DeForest Buckner in the run game either. So it's just, I think the way they're building it is fine. Build within the trenches. It's like inside and out. The inside is the trenches, and then just worry about that and just probably plug and play in that corner position, because right now the way they got it, they got the formula. So there really shouldn't be much criticism just because of that, 3rd and 15 play that people were talking about, or when D Ford, or when all those injuries happened on the defensive line. Like, come on, let's get real. The way they're building it is fine. No need to overthink it, because that's over analysis, and then people are just gonna start nitpicking things that aren't even there.
Okay, so from what you said, I kind of think that you agree with them not addressing their secondary this offseason and investing more in their defensive line.
Yeah, just investing in the defensive line. It's just always the premier way, and that's just always smart. And if they're gonna, at least from what I'm reading from the breadcrumbs that they're letting out, is that they want to address draft with defensive line, because a top pass rusher is going to cost more anyways in the corner, and just try to keep shuffling it so it's fresh and young and powerful, and then just find little scraps at corner, or maybe even safety. Because who have they drafted? Tim Harris? They don't really go towards the second. They don't really address secondary too hard in the draft. So what they're doing is perfectly fine for them. Defense right there in the trenches.
Okay, yeah. I mean, Tim Harris, I had some guys tell me on Twitter that they didn't draft any secondary players or address in free agency, obviously aside from cap space or lack of picks, because they really like Tim Harris. And I'm like, however you may feel about Tim Harris, he's not the answer moving forward. So I think that they're definitely planning on bringing some guys back. You got the 49ers, who now have kind of resurged and came back to their prime. They won the division last year. You got the Seahawks, who are always great as long as they have Russell Wilson. It seems like they can skate by no matter what scenario they're in, how many points they're down. They always have a chance if Russell Wilson's under center. And the Cardinals are starting to look kind of dangerous. Last year they played the 49ers tough in both games. They were in position to win both games late in the game. And then the Rams are doing whatever the Rams are doing. How do you see the division shaking out, and how many wins do you see the 49ers coming away with within the division when it's all said and done?
That's hard, because it's always tough to project when we're in May and you're doing this stuff. But I'm gonna start first with who sounded like as a real threat. I think it's the Arizona Cardinals, and like you said, it's those 2 games that they played that proved to be much of a handful for them. I know that Thursday night game was, short week on the road, and of course, second half collapse at some point was gonna come. You can't really hold that too much against them. But I mean, that home game against them, that was a one that the Cardinals kind of should have had a little bit if they actually put their foot on the 49ers' neck, but they didn't. So Kyler Murray, maybe like a second-year development, him coming in, another year in the playbook, more polished, more refined, because he is dangerous. You're seeing lately about who's the best NFC West quarterbacks. And people already put in Kyler Murray over Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm not there yet. I still think Jimmy is better than Kyler, though I do think Kyler's ceiling is way beyond what Jimmy's is off top. So if Kyler's even able to start tapping into that potential, 49ers have some issues, because running quarterbacks, mobile quarterbacks, gave them their worst fits last season. And not to mention that the Cardinals do have an adequate running game, which once again, that's not the 49ers forte on defense. If you're going to destroy them, go on the trenches on the ground, and because what's better, you want to run the ball and try to get some easy runs, or are you going to drop back and let Nick Bosa, D Ford and company try to maul Kyler Murray? Even though he has athletic ability, you don't always want to put him at risk. And then you also got DeAndre Hopkins, that revamped wide receiver core, and even that defense isn't half bad. They got Isaiah Simmons, but even more than that, you got Chandler Jones. You have an adequate secondary. The only thing that drawbacks why I'm hesitant about the Arizona Cardinals is because they have Vance Joseph as a defensive coordinator. They have a clown for a defensive coordinator. That's not really going to work out there. If the reason why the Cardinals don't get to 8 wins or whatever more than that, it's going to be because that he doesn't know how to set his defense up, which is evident in Denver in the years prior. He's pretty incompetent. So for that case, that Kyle Shanahan might have to just go over the talent. So I think personally, though, they still are they're going to be the threat, though, dethrone the Seattle Seahawks. Now, the Seahawks are a threat. I know Russell Wilson, so long as he's there, he's always going to be a threat to anyone, pretty much. But they are a little overhyped. They have a pretty solid running game. But other than that, they don't have a defense. They had that one nice defense. I think that might have been the best defensive game against any team, the 49ers on Monday Night Football. And then since then, just nothing, just a nice plummet drop off the top rope as if we're watching a WrestleMania match. So, I mean, the Seahawks, they're solid. They're always going to be a challenge for the 49ers, but it's Russell Wilson magic. I feel like what we saw for those first 2 quarters, even 3 quarters in Week 17, when the 49ers went into their house and punched them in the mouth, that was the true matchup.
So Seattle's still going to be challenged. Rams, I'm not even talking about the Rams. Come on.
Right.
They'll still be there, sure, because Sean McVay, as much as he gets slack from last season, he's not building the team. But the Rams will be there. But personally to me, I think the Cardinals are, because at least they can challenge the 49ers secondary, and Kyler Murray can keep a play alive on the ground and challenge those pass rushers still. And if not, they still have that dual threat with running the ball just straight up the gut and just gashing the 49ers defense. And I definitely see the 49ers splitting with Arizona. Maybe not that week 1 matchup, but I think they play them in week 16 and week 15. It's either one of those two against them and the Cowboys. That's going to be crucial. It's week 16 Cardinals and 17 Seahawks. That's going to be interesting. And I'm pretty sure the NFL wants these teams to be very close within the race. Because imagine those ratings. That's going to be a hit, especially after last year, how week 17 did. But those 3 games are going to be very tough. Niners maybe should hopefully pick a sweep with the Rams, just like last year, and even a sweep in the Seahawks, but splitting. So 5-1, 4-2 should be the guess. I'm going to bet on 5-1 and just making that split with Arizona.
Yeah, Arizona, they played really well last year, and they kind of caught fire like later on. That Kenyon Drake trade was completely under the radar, and as soon as he came in, their defense was completely different, hit a different dynamic. I think his first game with the Cardinals was that Thursday night matchup against the 49ers, and he hit the ground running, man. He was hitting holes, gashing the defense, and we were kind of like, whoa, like, who's this guy? It seems like anybody that escapes Miami finds success, and that's exactly what happened. So it's going to be some tough matchups, that's for sure, because the 49ers and Cardinals, over the last few years, it hasn't really been that great of games, but last year there were good games, and they've always played the Seahawks well, no matter what. It seems like they're kind of always match up well for some reason, even when they had, previous coaching staffs, previous quarterbacks, they've always matched up well with the Seahawks. So sure. I think they surpass the Seahawks this year. I wouldn't be surprised to see 49ers, Cardinals, Seahawks, Rams as the order of the division when it's all said and done. They got the 13th overall pick from Indianapolis, and then they already had obviously the 31st overall pick, which they traded up for to select Brandon Ayuk, and then they traded back from 13 to 14 to get Javon Kinlaw. How do you see both of these guys contributing right away this season?
Well, both, I think they're not going to, obviously people want to say, oh, they found the Sanders replacement, found the Buckner replacement. Sure, but not right off the bat. They're not going to, it's not like Ayuk started week 1, or maybe. But I especially now with, no train, might not even be a training camp. There's no ETAs. That's a lot of reps he's missing out on, even Kinlaw. So I don't think they're going to be instantaneous starters, more like rotational at some point. So maybe Bourne gets that second start, or whoever steps up to the plate. And for the wide receiver positions we're talking about, we'll just go straight up. I don't think that they were necessarily looking for that Sanders replacement. You're not going to replace what was Sanders' most valued trait? His experience, right? His veteran, his leadership. His production was so. You can replace that with Ayuk, probably no problem. What they do want to replace is just having more of a stacked quality of wide receivers, because they had that nice core of Bourne, Samuel, and Sanders. Now you hope to have that core of 2 and Ayuk, but you're also getting Hurd back and Taylor back. So this is the first time that Kyle Shanahan finally has his dream scenario of having a stacked wide receiver group. Finally. So I know people want to say, oh, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. And even I mentioned that in my article, but that's more so of who's like the overall talent. Shanahan, I'm pretty sure, is not thinking that way. He's looking at his playbook and just, cool, now I have more adequate talent. Let me add an extra page or 2 to my playbook for variety. It's not about who's wide receiver 1 or 2. It's who's going to be wide receiver that can fit a certain situation. That's how he's thinking. So, Trent Taylor, I need someone quick to get in the slot or to an outwards and get a third down conversion. Or Jalen Hurd, I need a body bruiser real quick. Debo Samuel, need someone to go to home run. There's a lot of options there. So Ayuk, I don't think he's ever going to – he'll get a start maybe second half of the season, similar to what Debo had. How he started really coming around second half of the season. So I see something similar with Ayuk. Kinlaw, I don't think he's going to be involved in running downs early. They might give that to someone like a Julian Taylor, DJ Jones, whoever they've seen fit to just rotate in there, or Eric Armstead even. He's no doubt going to be there for passing downs. But I think Chris Kasarik, defensive line coach, is going to really need to shape him and mold him into that really nice, vicious run defender that Buckner had his moments, but he wasn't really stout there. So you want to really try to see if you can develop Kinlaw into that dual threat, and not to be an every down person because they do want to rotate that defensive line. But just so enough that because if you keep Kinlaw, if you want to throw Kinlaw out there, then it's going to get predictable that, hey, he's out there for a pass. He's out there to pass rush. So let me check to a stretch run and get out there, go in between, and let me just rip off a gain, especially knowing that the 49ers' weakness is run defense. So there's a lot of options here. And just once again, elaborates with the beginning that it's going to be a lot of coaching involved because with this pandemic going on, it's tough. They're losing out on a lot of reps. I know they're not really hitting each other or touching each other, but it's all about technique. It's all about trying to get used to that game speed so that when it's not there, they're not just like a deer in headlights, which I'm really interested to see, assuming that there are games. But that's how I envision it. Kinlaw mainly pass rushing downs, then maybe second half of the season start rolling them out twice, and then Ayuk building a role. But more so, I think it's just going to be a collaborative ordeal that Shanahan's going to do with that group.
Okay, yeah, and I've seen people kind of go back and forth. People have said Kinlaw's the type of guy who could start day one. Now, while I agree he probably could, it's a matter of should he, and if the 49ers feel comfortable with where he is in his progression, where he is with what they're asking him to do. Mm-hmm. And Ayuk, I don't know, it kind of seems like wide receivers, they're hit or miss if that talent translates right away to the NFL. Some you see guys like A.J. Brown and even Debo took a while to catch on, but A.J. Brown, it seemed like he hit the gates running last season. But some wide receivers take a year or two, so it's tough to predict with Ayuk. Do you think he comes in and from a talent perspective alone, he's the most talented receiver on the roster?
Oh, well, maybe if you try to look from a ceiling standpoint, but I still personally think Deebo Samuel is the best receiver on board because I loved him last year because I thought he was the best wide receiver in my eyes going into the draft. And it's just mainly because of how he works so well with his feet. You always got to watch his feet and how good he shuffles, how he hesitates to the left and then cuts right in. That little split second. That's why he's such a perfect fit with the 49ers offense because they love to attack the middle of the field. It's just quick releases because, and it kind of ties into why Garoppolo gets so much slack. Why does it go deep? Well, that's not really part of their attack. They'll do that occasionally, but it's not really, their shtick, It's like telling Steph Curry, hey, why aren't you dunking more? Well, it's not a stick. 3-point shooting is a stick. So it's like, I digress. Point is, Deebo Samuel still the best one. And like you said, it does take a while for these players to come around and get into their own, especially now, lack of OTA is not going to have that. I think it is what it's going to be. What I just said, it's going to be about a collaborative effort. It's going to be everyone. It's going to be a platoon system at wide receiver. It's going to be, all right, Deebo is going to allocate like a certain percentage of snaps and maybe looks. And then Kendrick at some point, Ayuk will fit you in, Herb will fit you in, Taylor will fit you in, and whoever else makes the team will try to fit you in whatever the given scenario is. Because point is, they're always going to try to look for Kittle first, but then they're also going to use him for a decoy. But then they can also use Debo it's like a trickle down effect. It's going to go down there, and then you still have the running backs as receivers. So Ayuk, that's why I don't think he's going to have a stellar rookie season to the degree of Debo because that receiver group was depleted. Hurd was gone, Taylor was gone, Sanders, they had to give up a third-round pick just to get him middle of the season. So Ayuk can be one of the better receivers, one of the best receivers. Right now, not at all, especially without lack of those reps, but he can be a contributor, and I expect him to be a contributor, and it's just going to fit the mold. It's going to fit the mold perfectly of that aggressiveness, of how you can get into the corners and block for the run game. And then also, what can you do with the ball in your hands? So I think right now, Shanahan's really giddy because, like I said, he has a bunch of receivers that he can just throw out there and just have a variety. He's like Madison Bumgarner. What pitch I'm gonna throw at you? Bet you can't stop it. So it's gonna be funny to see how he starts toying with defenses.
Yeah, and the NFL should be a little nervous now that he's finally building an arsenal of offensive weapons, guys that he's really confident in, guys that it seems like he's like, obviously he's handpicking these guys. It's his team's draft, but sure. It's not like he came in and inherited a team, inherited a roster, and he kind of made some little tweaks all he could do. No, he's had a few years in the system, as the head coach, and he's able to build the roster the way he is, teaming up obviously with John Lynch and, Adam Peters, guys like that. And it seems like he's pretty excited from all his media, everything he's saying. You could kind of see like you said, the giddiness in him, and he just probably can't wait to get some reps in and hit the field. Now they also spent I believe a 6th-round pick on Charlie Warner, the tight end out of Georgia. what role do you envision him having with this team? Do you think he's a guy that might not even make the roster, or do you think he's a guy that will have a small role moving forward?
He likely will make the roster. Again, another player who's gonna get screwed up by the coronavirus, everything, lack of OTAs and everything. But I still think the Niners will carry him on because they like to carry 3 tight ends because it's kind of what they do with the blocks and everything, keeping everything fresh. Dwelly was good. They had Levi and Toilolo out there for surprisingly a decent number of plays for heavy sets of blocking or whatever else they needed him for. But yeah, he could make it. Perhaps not right in the beginning. Maybe a practice squad fill, and maybe they bring him up so they see fit. But that's a tricky one, because it kind of sucks. I kind of feel for these players, and it's because overall the quality isn't going to be to the top, because a lot of these rookies that we're all pandering about, it's pretty much just going to be what they have raw talent, what they're just working on the side. They're not really like digging in, getting like hardcore advice from their coaches and everything. So I see him making the roster, but don't pencil him in because of the situation. But he is going to provide that necessary depth when Toilolo left. And the 49ers love the tight ends. They love the fullbacks. It's almost like an old school, but it's also just new with all how he revamps and does all this ghost motion and everything. It's kind of crazy, and it just shows how much of a sponge Shanahan is. He just soaks it in and just makes just a cappella with his playbook, just does whatever the hell he wants, which is great. That's what you want your head coach to be, play caller to be. So Warner, if you can develop into something, because I know he is known to be a good blocker, it's just if he can start to come around to a little bit of a receiver, that way he's not predictable when he comes out and, oh, look, Warner's out. It's most likely going to be a block. So if he can develop into that, then he's for sure going to have an adequate time as a 49er.
We're not really sure if there will be a 2020 NFL season. If you were a betting man, would you say, A, it happens at all? And B, if it does happen, will anybody be in the stands?
I am a betting man, so the way to expose my addiction, nah, not to that degree. I like a little blackjack once in a while; it doesn't hurt. But I think 100% of season is going to happen because the NFL wants it to happen, and they're going to do whatever it is in their power to make it happen. Because then, if they don't, then they're really going to lose out on money more than it is without fans. Is it going to be without fans? Very likely, I think, at this point, because look, we're already 3 months from the first preseason game happening. I'm pretty sure that Hall of Fame game is just going to get written off too. They're not even going to have it. And look right now in the Bay Area, California itself, LA shelter in place until August pretty much. So what are the Rams going to do? Chargers, right? What are the 49ers going to do? They're talking about, going to Arizona, Rams and Chargers, go to Vegas. It's a really like, you really have to be interchangeable in the situation and adapt on the fly. You really have to be glued to your phone. All right, what's going to happen? Prepare. And I just kind of feel for some of these fans who are buying these expensive tickets to go, especially if you're going to try to, want to go cross country or just kind of far out of your ways. It's like, you want to see them and everything, but just on that TV is just as good sometimes. But it's 100% going to happen. There's just no way I see the NFL say, well, let's just not have it. We'll just like, no, of course they're going to have it. It's the leading TV show in the nation. Of course it's going to happen. Is it going to be with fans? Probably not. But at some point, maybe if everything gets, fingers crossed, everything starts getting very close to normal, that eventually they start teetering in. I just wonder how it's all going to work. Maybe they'll just do it. Oh, yeah, we'll do a row, every row, a person. I don't know. They're probably thinking about that just so, once again, that cap hit doesn't take that real drop, because it's going to drop. The question is how much. So maybe if they do let some people, they stagger it a little bit, stagger it in, limit it, maybe figure out a way to just somehow make a profit, because the NFL is good at figuring out ways to make a profit and just keeping things cycling through. So it'll be very interesting to see how to figure out, but I would be shocked if they outright cancel the season. Maybe a game, maybe some games, but the season, no way.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I don't think that they would go the same way as the NBA or the MLB. I think the NFL, I don't want to say they value money too much, but I think they value having the product out there. They every Sunday during the season, you can count on a football game being there. I don't think they break through that tradition. They probably find ways to proceed safely and manage whatever risks there are. And, these are all adults, or all professionals. If they are aware of the risks and they're willing to proceed anyway, I don't see what the problem is with that. But yeah, that's going to do it for us today, guys. Jose, I really appreciate you tuning in or joining us, excuse me. And it was a lot of fun. Guys, make sure you follow Jose on Twitter. His handle is below. His latest article was about Fred Warner, why he could have an all-pro year next season. And yeah, make sure you follow him. His handle's below. Thanks, guys.